I was supposed to be in a closed casket. But at 3 o'clock a.m., the murdered boss of the Chicago syndicate bled onto the linoleum of a run-down diner. He looked at the heavy-set waitress, trembling behind the counter. He didn't want food. I wanted the name of his killer. Penelope Hayes carried her 260 pounds with the weary grace of a woman who had spent 10 years working the graveyard shift. Her thick thighs chafed beneath the cheap polyester of her uniform, and her apron string dug sharply into the soft, heavy roll of her stomach. At 32, Penelope was fat, and she knew it. She lived in a world that rendered women of her size entirely invisible. Men didn't look at her twice. Customers snapped their fingers at her, as if she were a piece of the furniture, and the city of Chicago hummed around her, entirely indifferent to her existence. But invisibility had its perks. People didn't notice the fat waitress standing in the shadows. People didn't realize what she saw. It was a blistering Tuesday night at Lou's 24-hour grill on Wabash Avenue. The diner smelled eternally of burnt coffee, old fryer grease, and pine sol. Outside, a torrential Midwestern downpour was washing the grit off the streets. Penelope stood behind the counter, absent-mindedly wiping down the formica surface with a damp rag. The diner was empty, save for a snoring truck driver in the corner booth. Her mind, as it often did these days, drifted back to that night 6 months ago. It had been a catering drop-off at the Velvet Room, an upscale club on Rush Street, known to be a front for the Moretti crime family. Penelope had hauled 3 heavy trays of baked ziti out to the back alley, because the bouncers wouldn't let a girl her size through the front doors. She had been taking a moment to catch her breath, hiding behind a rusted industrial dumpster, when the back door opened. She had frozen, terrified, pressing her ample frame against the brick wall. Through the sleet, she had watched Carmine Rossi, the sharp-suited, slick-haired underboss of the Moretti family, hand a thick manila envelope to a mechanic with a jagged burn scar across his throat. "The boss takes the Cadillac down Lakeshore tomorrow at 8, Carmine had whispered, his voice slicing through the cold night air. "Make sure the C4 is wired to the ignition. No mistakes. When Vincent turns the key, I want him in pieces." The next morning, the news anchors across every local channel reported the tragic, fiery death of Vincent Moretti, the ruthless head of the Chicago syndicate. His car had detonated on Lakeshore Drive, leaving nothing but scorched metal. Carmine Rossi had immediately taken over the family, swearing bloody vengeance on rival gangs for the cowardly assassination. Penelope had kept her mouth shut. Who was going to believe a fat, nobody waitress? If she went to the cops, Carmine would have her throat slit before breakfast. So she swallowed the secret, burying it deep under layers of anxiety and late-night slices of cherry pie. The chime of the diner's front door snapped Penelope back to the present. She looked up, pasting on her mandatory customer service smile. "Welcome to Lou's. Grab a seat." The words died in her throat. The man standing in the doorway was soaking wet, his expensive black wool overcoat plastered to his broad shoulders. He was clutching his left side, and thick, dark blood was seeping through his fingers, dripping onto the checkered linoleum floor. But it wasn't the blood that made Penelope's heart stop. It was the face. High, aristocratic cheekbones, piercing, predator cold blue eyes, a strong, unforgiving jaw covered in a rough, dark stubble. He looked thinner, older, and deeply battered, but there was absolutely no mistaking him. Vincent Moretti was dead. She had seen his funeral on television. Yet here he was, locking the diner door behind him with a sharp click and flipping the neon open sign to closed. Penelope backed away, her hands trembling so violently she dropped the rag. You're... Vincent leaned heavily against the counter, his breathing ragged. He pulled a heavy, matte black Glock from his coat pocket and set it on the countertop. It wasn't a threat. It was a surrender of exhaustion. "I need coffee," Vincent rasped, his voice sounding like crushed gravel. "And I need the first aid kit you keep under the register." "You're Vincent Moretti," Penelope whispered, her wide, terrified eyes locked on his face. Her chest heaved, straining the buttons of her tight uniform. Vincent's icy blue eyes flicked over her. He didn't look at her with the usual disgust or dismissal she was accustomed to from handsome, powerful men. His gaze was intensely analytical, stripping her down to her core. "And you're the girl behind the dumpster," Vincent said quietly. Penelope's breath hitched. He knew. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, backing up until her wide hips hit the commercial coffee machine. "6 months ago. Rush Street." Vincent winced, clutching his bleeding side. "I was on the fire escape above you, smoking a cigar in the dark. I saw you deliver the pasta. I saw you hide when my rat of an underboss came out. I saw you listen." He gritted his teeth, his knees buckling slightly before he caught himself. "I didn't hear what Carmine said. I just saw the exchange. The next morning my car blew up. I barely made it out before the blast, left a decoy body in the driver's seat, and went underground to find out who ordered the hit." He looked up, locking eyes with her. "I've spent 6 months hunting ghosts. Tonight, Carmine's men found me before I found them. Put a bullet in my oblique. So I'm asking you, Waitress, what did Carmine say that night?" Penelope was paralyzed. "If I tell you, they'll kill me." "If you don't help me right now," Vincent said, a dark puddle pooling at his leather shoes, "I bleed out on your floor. And when Carmine's cleaners track my blood here, they will kill you anyway, just for seeing my face." He was right. The reality of the criminal underworld had just crashed into her mundane, invisible life. Penelope swallowed hard. She looked at the snoring trucker, then back at the bleeding mafia boss. She made a decision that would alter the course of her life forever. She reached under the counter, grabbed the heavy industrial first aid kit, and unhooked her stained apron. "My car is out back," Penelope said, her voice shaking but surprisingly clear. "We can't stay here. Lou has security cameras. I know how to erase the footage, but we have to move." Vincent's lips twitched into the ghost of a smirk, despite the agony he was in. "What's your name?" "Penelope." "All right, Penelope. Lead the way." The drive to Rogers Park was a nightmare of paranoia. Penelope's beaten-up 2012. Ford Taurus groaned in protest as she sped through the rain-slicked streets of Chicago. In the passenger seat, the most dangerous man in the city was slumped against the window, breathing heavily, clutching a bundle of bar napkins to his bleeding torso. Penelope gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. Her thick arms trembled with adrenaline. She was hyper-aware of how much space she took up in the driver's seat, how her belly pressed against the bottom of the steering wheel. She felt completely out of her depth. This man was royalty in the underworld, a millionaire who dated supermodels and commanded armies of hitmen. And here he was, bleeding in a car that smelled faintly of stale French fries and cheap vanilla air freshener. "Why didn't you go to the police?" Vincent asked suddenly, his voice low, breaking the tense silence. "Are you kidding?" Penelope scoffed, keeping her eyes on the road. Detective Harris eats free at Lou's every Thursday. Last month, I saw Carmine Rossi slip him a fat envelope right at table 4. The cops belong to your family. Vincent turned his head, genuinely impressed. You pay attention. People don't notice me, Penelope said bitterly. They talk in front of me like I'm deaf and blind. Being fat makes you part of the wallpaper. Vincent's gaze dropped to her heavy thighs, then back up to her flushed, round face. I noticed you. The quiet intensity of his words made a strange shiver run down Penelope's spine. She ignored it, turning the wheel sharply into the alleyway behind her brick apartment building on North Sheridan Road. We're here. 3rd floor. No elevator, she warned, throwing the car into park. I'll manage, Vincent grunted. It took them 10 grueling minutes to get up the narrow, dimly lit stairwell. Vincent leaned heavily on Penelope, his muscular arm draped over her broad shoulders. She could feel the hard, coiled strength of his body against her soft, plush curves. He smelled of rain, expensive cologne, and copper blood. When they finally stumbled into her cramped one-bedroom apartment, Penelope locked the deadbolt and 3 chain locks. The apartment was tidy but undeniably cheap. Floral thrift store armchairs, a small TV, and lace curtains. Sit on this bathroom counter, Penelope ordered, her maternal instincts kicking in to override her fear. I need to look at that wound. Vincent obeyed, grimacing as he hoisted himself onto the porcelain counter. The bathroom was tight. When Penelope stepped between his parted knees to access his side, there was no space left. Her soft stomach brushed against his uninjured thigh. She immediately flushed crimson, trying to suck her waist in, mortified by her own bulk. Don't do that, Vincent said softly. Penelope paused, looking at him. Do what? Make yourself smaller. You have nothing to apologize for. His icy blue eyes were unblinkingly locked onto hers. Flustered, Penelope grabbed a pair of trauma shears from the first aid kit. I have to cut your shirt. I'm sorry, I know it's expensive. Cut it. She snipped the fine Italian cotton away, exposing his torso. Penelope had never been this close to a man like this. His chest was broad, chiseled out of marble, dusted with dark hair, and marred by several old, faded scars. The new wound was on his left side, a clean through-and-through bullet hole that had missed his vital organs, but was bleeding profusely. It went straight through, Penelope breathed, wiping the blood away with gauze soaked in rubbing alcohol. But it needs stitches. I'm not a doctor. I've sewn myself up before. Just give me the needle and the lidocaine if you have it, Vincent said, his jaw tightening as the alcohol burned. I sew my own clothes because stores don't carry my size, Penelope said, her voice steadying. I can stitch you up. Just hold still. For the next 20 minutes, the only sound in the tiny bathroom was the pouring rain outside the frosted window and Vincent's sharp intakes of breath. Penelope worked with surprising dexterity, her plump, dimpled hands moving gracefully as she sutured the bullet hole. Vincent watched her face the entire time. He watched the way her brow furrowed in concentration. He noticed the soft curve of her double chin, the lush fullness of her lips, and the genuine kindness in her dark brown eyes. In Vincent's world, women were sharp, calculating, and surgically enhanced. They wanted his money or his power. Penelope wanted nothing. She was just trying to keep him alive. Carmine, Vincent finally said, breaking the silence as she tied off the last stitch. You said you saw him behind the club. Penelope nodded, taping a heavy square of gauze over the stitches. She stepped back, giving him breathing room, suddenly feeling the oppressive intimacy of the space. Carmine handed an envelope to a guy with a bad burn scar on his neck, Penelope said, washing the blood off her hands in the sink. He told him to put C4 under your Cadillac. He said he wanted you in pieces. A dark, terrifying shadow fell over Vincent's face. The vulnerable, bleeding man vanished, replaced instantly by the ruthless Mafia Don. His hands gripped the edge of the counter so hard, his knuckles turned white. The scarred man is Leo the Torch Valenti. Freelance explosives, Vincent murmured, his voice laced with venom. Carmine, my own flesh and blood. My cousin. I treated him like a brother. Why would he do it? Penelope asked softly, handing him a clean, oversized grey sweatshirt she usually wore to bed. Vincent pulled it over his head, wincing. Because I was transitioning the family into legitimate businesses. Real estate. Casinos. Carmine wanted to keep running drugs and guns. He thought I was getting soft. Vincent looked up at Penelope, his eyes burning with a cold blue fire. I'm going to show him exactly how soft I am. Penelope hugged her arms around her heavy chest. What happens now? Now I rest for a few hours. Then I start taking my city back. Vincent stood up from the counter. He towered over her, imposing and lethal. But when he reached out, his touch was remarkably gentle. His large, rough hand cupped her soft, round cheek. His thumb brushed over her skin. You saved my life tonight, Penelope Hayes, Vincent said, his voice dropping an octave, sending a flush of heat straight to her core. No one has ever done something for me without expecting a favor in return. I don't forget debts, and I protect what is mine. Penelope's breath caught in her throat. The way he looked at her. It wasn't the gaze of a man looking at a fat, invisible waitress. It was the gaze of a wolf looking at his mate. I'm not yours, she whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. Vincent offered that dark ghost of a smirk again. We'll see about that. Suddenly, the silence of the apartment was shattered by the violent, deafening sound of Penelope's front door being kicked off its hinges. Men were shouting. Heavy boots stormed into her small living room. Carmine's cleaners had found them. The splintering crash of the apartment door, being kicked off its hinges, echoed like a bomb blast in the tiny living space. Rain blew in from the broken entryway, accompanied by the heavy, thudding footsteps of Carmine's hitmen. Penelope froze in the bathroom, the bloody trauma shears slipping from her plump, trembling fingers. Her heart hammered against her rib cage like a trapped bird. Vincent Moretti did not freeze. The bleeding mafia boss instantly transformed from a wounded animal into an apex predator. He lunged forward, his massive hand clamping over Penelope's mouth to muffle her gasp. He shoved her roughly but silently behind the heavy porcelain of the bathtub. Stay down. Do not make a sound, no matter what happens, Vincent whispered, his lips grazing her ear. The sheer, terrifying calm in his voice sent a shockwave of cold adrenaline straight down her spine. He unholstered his matte black Glock, stepping out of the narrow bathroom hallway and melting into the shadows of the living room. Penelope squeezed her eyes shut, pressing her heavy frame against the cold tile, trying desperately to make herself as small as possible. But she couldn't block out the sounds. Check the bedroom. He's bleeding like a stuck pig. He couldn't have gone far, a gruff voice barked. Two muffled thwips from a silencer sliced through the air. A heavy body hit the floorboards, knocking over Penelope's thrift store lamp, with a sickening crunch. Another man shouted, opening fire with a loud, unsuppressed submachine gun. The deafening roar tore through Penelope's floral armchair, sending synthetic stuffing flying like snow. Vincent fired back, 3 precise, rhythmic shots. Another body collapsed. Silence descended, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the relentless Chicago rain pouring through the shattered doorway. "Penelope, we move. Now," Vincent commanded, appearing in the doorway. His face was splashed with a grim canvas of blood, none of it his own. He grabbed her hand, hoisting her up with a terrifying, coiled strength that defied his recent bullet wound. They didn't go out the front door. Vincent led her to the kitchen window, smashing the glass with the butt of his gun. The rusted metal of the fire escape groaned in protest as they climbed out into the freezing deluge. Penelope slipped, her thick thighs bruising against the wrought iron, but Vincent caught her by the waist, his grip bruising and possessive. They scrambled down to the muddy alleyway. Penelope's old Ford Taurus was a sitting duck, so Vincent dragged her toward the main street. Under the flickering glow of a broken streetlight, he hot-wired a parked, unremarkable silver sedan in less than 30 seconds. "Get in," he ordered. Penelope threw her heavy body into the passenger seat, gasping for air, her lungs burning. As Vincent peeled out onto North Sheridan Road, Penelope looked back. 3 more of Carmine's men were spilling out of her apartment building, guns drawn, shouting into radios. "They destroyed my home," Penelope whispered, the shock finally giving way to a profound, crushing sorrow. Her safe haven, her sanctuary away from the cruel, mocking eyes of the world, was gone. Vincent's jaw ticked. He aggressively shifted gears, merging onto Lakeshore Drive. The city lights blurred into streaks of neon gold and crimson. "I will buy you a mansion on the Gold Coast by tomorrow morning, but tonight we need to disappear." He navigated them toward the subterranean labyrinth of Lower Wacker Drive. The GPS signal died as they plunged into the concrete tunnels beneath the city. Vincent drove deep into the forgotten maintenance sectors, finally pulling the car into a subterranean loading dock chained off by the city. "This is an old bootlegging tunnel," Vincent explained, cutting the engine. "Originally built by Tony Accardo back in the outfit days. Carmine doesn't know about it. Only the old guard does." Penelope followed him through a heavy steel door into a surprisingly modern, climate-controlled bunker. It was lined with weapons, stacks of cash, and a massive mahogany desk. It was the nerve center of a ghost. Vincent collapsed into a leather chair, exhaling a long, ragged breath. He looked up at Penelope. She was shivering, soaked to the bone, her uniform clinging to her abundant curves. She crossed her thick arms over her stomach, a defensive habit she had developed in middle school to hide her bulk. "Stop doing that," Vincent said, his voice echoing in the concrete room. "I'm cold," she lied, looking at the floor. Vincent stood up, walking slowly toward her. He stripped off his wet coat, revealing the grey sweatshirt she had given him. He reached out, gently pulling her arms away from her stomach. "You hide yourself from the world," Vincent murmured, his thumb stroking the soft, dimpled skin of her wrist. "You think your size makes you unworthy of being seen. But tonight, while my highly trained capos betrayed me, the invisible Waitress saved my life and outran a hit squad. You are braver than any man in my syndicate." Penelope's breath hitched. A hot, unfamiliar tear tracked down her cheek. "I'm just a fat girl who serves coffee, Vincent." "You are the woman who holds the key to my empire," he corrected fiercely, pulling her plush body flush against his hard, muscular frame. "And when I take my throne back, you will sit right beside me." Before she could process his words, Vincent turned away, moving to the desk. The romantic tension abruptly snapped into clinical, militant focus. He rolled out a blueprint of the city and grabbed a red marker. The strategy for retribution. Locate the rat, find Leo the Torch, Valenti, and extract a recorded confession detailing Carmine's orders. Secure the old guard. Contact the 3 remaining loyal capos who despised Carmine's new, reckless leadership. Crash the coronation. Infiltrate the Velvet Room at midnight, where Carmine was hosting the 5 families to officially cement his role as boss. "I can find Leo," Penelope said suddenly, surprising herself. Vincent raised an eyebrow. "How?" "Because Leo comes into Lou's diner every Wednesday at 4 a.m. He orders hash browns and flirts with the morning shift waitresses. It's Wednesday. He'll be there in 2 hours. Vincent's cold blue eyes lit up with a terrifying, predatory glee. "You, Penelope Hayes, are an absolute masterpiece." The neon sign of Lou's 24-hour grill buzzed aggressively in the dark. From the tinted windows of the silver sedan parked across the street, Vincent and Penelope watched the diner. Right on time, Leo the Torch. Valenti walked in. The jagged burn scar on his neck pulsed red under the fluorescent lights. He sat at the counter, a smug, arrogant grin plastered on his face. "Stay here," Vincent ordered, racking the slide of his Glock. "Keep the engine running." Penelope watched, her heart in her throat, as the dead Mafia boss stepped out into the rain. Vincent moved like a phantom. He didn't use the front door. He slipped through the alley and entered through the kitchen loading dock. Inside the diner, Leo was laughing with a waitress when a massive, gloved hand suddenly clamped down on the back of his neck, smashing his face brutally into his plate of hash browns. Penelope gasped from the car. Through the window, she saw Vincent yank the dazed, bleeding bomber backward, dragging him effortlessly into the shadows of the kitchen. 10 minutes later, Vincent emerged from the alley, tossing a sleek black digital recorder onto the passenger seat next to Penelope. "He sang like a canary," Vincent said coldly, wiping a drop of blood off his knuckle. "Carmine paid him 50 grand and a territory in the south side to wire the C4. Now, we go to the Velvet Room." The drive to Rush Street was silent, thick with impending violence. Penelope's hands gripped the steering wheel. She was no longer just a bystander. She was the getaway driver for a mob war. The Velvet Room was heavily guarded. A dozen black SUVs lined the curb, surrounded by men in sharp suits bulging with concealed weapons. Carmine Rossi was inside, celebrating his absolute power, completely unaware that a ghost was walking up the back steps. "Park in the alley. Lock the doors. Do not leave this car," Vincent instructed, his eyes turning to chips of blue ice. He leaned over the center console, taking Penelope's soft face in his hands, and kissed her. It was a hard, claiming kiss that tasted of rain and adrenaline. "I will be back for you." Vincent stepped out of the car, blending into the darkness. Inside the opulent VIP lounge of the Velvet Room, crystal glasses clinked. Carmine Rossi, wearing a bespoke white tuxedo, raised a glass of expensive champagne to the heads of the 5 families. "To a new era in Chicago," Carmine proclaimed, his slicked-back hair catching the chandelier light. "An era of unparalleled profit. An era of unparalleled treachery," a deep, gravelly voice echoed from the doorway. The entire room froze. glasses shattered against the marble floor. Vincent Moretti stood in the archway, alive, furious, and radiating pure, lethal dominance. His Glock was already raised. "Vincent!" Carmine shrieked, his face draining of all color. "You're dead! I saw the car burn." "You missed," Vincent said simply. He tossed the digital recorder onto the center table. Leo's terrified, shaking voice immediately began playing, detailing every single aspect of Carmine's treason. The heads of the 5 families stared at Carmine in utter disgust. In the Mafia, killing a rival was business. Killing your own blood boss with a coward's bomb was an unforgivable sin. Carmine panicked. He reached frantic for the gold-plated revolver inside his tuxedo jacket. Vincent didn't even flinch. He squeezed the trigger. A single shot rang out, hitting Carmine squarely in the chest. The traitor collapsed backward, crashing over the champagne tower in a shower of glass and blood. The room was deathly quiet. Vincent lowered his weapon, looking at the remaining capos. "The throne is mine. Are there any objections?" The men immediately bowed their heads in absolute submission. 10 minutes later, the back door of the club opened. Penelope jumped in the driver's seat as Vincent walked out, entirely unscathed. The heavy burden of betrayal had been lifted from his broad shoulders. He opened the passenger door, sliding in next to her. He didn't look at the steering wheel or the old upholstery. He only looked at her. "It's done," Vincent breathed, reaching across the seat to weave his strong fingers through hers. "The city is mine again." "So, you'll go back to your life now," Penelope said, her voice dropping, a heavy sadness settling over her chest. "Back to the supermodels, back to the penthouses, and I'll go find a new diner to work at." Vincent's grip on her hand tightened painfully. "Are you out of your mind?" Penelope blinked, startled. "You aren't going anywhere, Penelope. I told you, I protect what is mine," Vincent growled, his intense blue eyes burning into hers. "You saved my life. You proved your loyalty. You didn't care about my money or my title. You just cared about me." He pulled her across the center console, ignoring the awkwardness of the tight space, dragging her heavy, soft body into his lap. Penelope gasped, her face flushing bright red as she felt the hard, undeniable evidence of his desire pressing against her thigh. "Vincent, I'm fat. I'm not a mafia wife," she stammered, overwhelmed. "You are a goddess," he corrected, his voice a dark, rough purr against her lips. "You are soft and beautiful and entirely mine. Tomorrow, I am buying you a closet full of silk dresses that hug every single curve on this gorgeous body. I am going to feed you at the best restaurants in the city, and I am going to parade you in front of every single man who ever dared to look right through you." He kissed her again, silencing her doubts, pouring all his fierce, possessive love into her. Penelope surrendered, her hands tangling in his dark hair. For the first time in 32 years, the invisible waitress was finally seen, and she was treated exactly like a queen. Did you love this thrilling mafia romance? If Penelope and Vincent's dangerous love story kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button. Share this video with your friends who crave intense, dramatic mafia stories where the underdog wins the boss's heart. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our gripping, real-life story drops. Please leave a comment below about your favorite plot twist right now.